Joining us right now, Texans Radio, it's Coach George Warhop, offensive line coach. How's it going, Coach?
Outstanding. How you guys doing today?
Great. Welcome to Houston. Great to have you with us. How's it been so far? Your reaction to being here, part of the organization under Lovie Smith?
It's been a whirlwind so far, but in terms of being with Lovie, I'm excited.
Coach, have you ever been to Texas? Has Texas ever been in your purview, so to speak?
My mom grew up here in Houston. She went to Yates High School.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So as a kid, we spent a lot of time here. I have a sister that lives here as well. I have cousins here, so I've spent a lot of time in Houston in my formative years.
But you then moved to California? Is that where you went to high school, grew up there? What?
I was born and raised in California.
Okay.
My mom grew up here in Houston. So,
Okay.
But yeah, I'm a California kid.
All right, California kid. You went to Cincinnati, right, to play?
Yes. I went to junior college first out of high school, then to Cincinnati.
All right, and you've coached a bunch of places here. This is interesting to me. Talk about a few of the stops here, Coach, because I think that all the experience you have is really going to help this team. How does it change? How do you evolve as a coach when you're coaching at different stops in the National Football League in particular?
That's a pretty broad, deep question right there. I mean, I can just start. When I left Boston College and went to the Rams as a coach, I had some success in college, and I thought I knew it all, right? And then you go to the Rams. I went to the Rams, and I was an assistant there for 2 years. And then I went to Arizona. I had the line by myself, and that was an experience because you really come to find out the first time you have them by yourself in the NFL, you know half of what you think you know. And then it's a process, right? And the process never stops. So you're always learning and growing and figuring out how to get the best out of your players. So for me, that first experience to now, I mean, I'm always learning and growing. I learn a lot from my players, get a lot of information from them in terms of how I give information, how they understand what we're trying to get done and how I get it across, what's best. And I curtail what I do to them for the most part.
Coach, what's changed the most since you got into the league? I mean, technology has become a really big part of a lot of things I know that we do, I know that teams do. What's been the biggest change for you since you got into the league?
Just the amount of information, right? And really what's changed to me is just what players can grasp. You can be really putting to the cutting edge of things. And as I say, we can play dirty a lot more because the players have a better understanding of what could happen from a scheme standpoint. When you're looking at a defense, you can explain something they're in this front. They can only do certain things because of coverage, right? When you started, we talked a little bit about coverage, but now we talk a lot about coverage.
Coach George Warhop joining us on Texans Radio. We always say the O-line is the closest position group on the team. Why is that, in your opinion?
Because we won't survive if we're not.
Okay.
We have to be joined at the hip, myself included. Myself and Hal, we have to be tied to these guys. These guys have to be tied to one another. There's got to be absolute trust, right? So when they're out there playing, we always start off, we have specific calls and way we communicate. But when they start playing, it might be a grunt, it might be a look, it might be a tap, it might be whatever to get things done. So for us to survive, we got to be joined at the hip. I mean, super tight.
Most importantly, are you going to get fined for doing this interview with us, being on the radio?
We'll figure that out when we start meeting together. Those fines will be going back and forth because I have no problem finding them either.
Yeah. Well, we'll try not to get them on the radio, I guess, if they're going to end up getting fined. Although they are some of the more cerebral guys you're gonna meet. Coach, you mentioned coverage, which is pretty interesting. When you are looking at young players coming out of college, and you're bringing them to the NFL. Is that something that you're looking for them to see whether they have a knowledge of that, or is that something, hey, this might be new to you, you're learning the whole NFL game, but we're going to teach you to look at the full picture as opposed to just your little sense of it? Is that something you look for as you start to look at young players?
No, I think that's happening in college, right? Boundary pressures, tackles making calls. So that's something that's ongoing. Most guys come into the league having to do some of that, seeing the back end and making their calls. But way back when, a lot of teams weren't coaching that.
Right.
What was it like working with Lovie Smith prior to this at Tampa Bay?
I love working with Lovie. One thing about Lovie now, he's pretty clear about what he wants, what the expectations are for the coaches, for the players. And if you like understanding what's expected, you want to work and play for Lovie, right? There's never any gray. He's going to be pretty matter of fact. And as you guys know, Lovey's even killed, doesn't yell, doesn't scream, okay, doesn't cuss, none of that. He just says, this is what I want, this is what I expect, and that's that. And for me, as a coach, I don't think you can be in a better environment.
I've got another former coach you worked with, Bill Parcells with the Dallas Cowboys. What was that like?
That was probably the greatest learning experience I've ever had as a coach. Bill is difficult to work with at times, right? He's very demanding and whatnot. But once you understand what he wants, okay, and you understand how he wants to go about building a roster, how he wants to play, I still use a lot of the stuff I learned from him even today. So it was probably the best experience I've had from a learning standpoint throughout my career in the NFL.
Coach, I know a lot of our listeners over the last couple of years, the run game here in Houston, I'm sure you've probably been beat over the head with this, but the run game in Houston has not been good the last couple of years. I think we've been near the bottom of the league, if not the bottom of the league, in the run game the last couple of years. I know our listeners, our fans are like, when are we going to get a running game? So I'll put the question to you not so much when are we getting a running game, but I'll ask it this way. What's most important to being successful in the running game in the NFL?
Consistency.
Okay.
You just got to be consistent from a technique standpoint. You got to be consistent in how you approach it. My big thing is we want to be physical, right? We want to come off the ball. We want strain finish. We want surge finish. As you look at the D linemen in this league, especially the interior guys, some of these dudes are monsters, right?
Yeah.
So to say we're going to go take a guy off the line of scrimmage 4 yards, and we're smoking dope if we're talking like that,
Yeah.
right? But what we want to do is get our fits, bring our feet after contact. We want to surge finish. And if a guy's trying to make a play on our back, we want to force arm tackles, right?
Yep.
So when our back's running through the line of scrimmage, which should be a 3-yard run, is going to turn into a 5-yard run with our surge and his surge. So it's just a mentality, technique-wise, and an understanding that, if we do our part, okay, we'll take care of the first and second level, and then incorporating the receivers to do a great job with the third-level players, and that's when you start having a real successful running game.
Here we are in draft prep. Combine is coming up, Coach, and the draft and evaluating potential selections. What do you see in college athletes that translates, and what do you see that you say, well, look, he's going to have to develop this, this, and this, and everybody needs to get better. I get that, but what are you looking for in a young player?
I'm pretty particular about what I look for. I look for things that I can't coach. I got a thing for length. I want my guys to have length. I want my guys to have athleticism. I want them to have quickness and change of direction. And they got to have toughness. That's got to be displayed on tape. The rest of it, if they fit those things, then that's up to us to get them to play to the level we want them to play.
Coach, do you have a pretty defined, I know we go through this a lot, you have a pretty defined thought process between guard and tackle? Guy plays guard or played tackle in college, and he's going to maybe project into guard. You hear a lot of time. Is too much made about that? Guy can play, you just find a spot for him. How do you kind of look at guard and tackle in particular?
No, that's 100% accurate. I mean, there's certain guys that can do both, and there's certain guys that are one-position guys or inside guys, outside guys. Again, number one, length, right? It's very difficult to play tackle if your length is less than 33. And to me, if it's less than 34. You can play guard with a 33, 32 and a half, somewhere in that range. So if you don't have the length as a tackle.
You're not talking waist size here, by the way.
No.
I know,
it's hard.
Right, so.
These guys are pretty skinny, actually. All right.
And then a range at tackle, right? So you need to have the guys that have vertical range at tackle because they got to work off the line of scrimmage. Guards, you're looking at horizontal range. How far can they stretch on the line of scrimmage? And then the next thing is just pop and explosion internally, right? You got to have a guy inside a guard that has some girth and some strength in his hips and his lower body that can displace the line of scrimmage. That is not as important as a tackle. So there is some defined differences. There's some guys that can do both.
Yep.
But most of your very best tackles, they're tackles, right? Some of your very best guards have been transition guys that started off as tackles and have gone inside. And then in college, a lot of those guys that are playing guard, they also transfer or transition to play in center, right? Just because they can get away with smaller guys in college that have to play inside and have to go to center.
All right, I've got one more for you, and I have to ask you this now because who knows when we get to talk again. But one of your stops, London Monarchs, offensive coordinator. How was that experience? What was that, a couple of seasons in the 90s?
Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that was awesome. The first year we won the championship. The second year we weren't as good. but quite an experience, right? We got together in Orlando, drafted a team, put it together. Everybody went about it differently. Our head coach was Larry Kennan. He knew a lot of these guys from the NFL. We took a lot of renegades. I mean, we had some guys that were renegades, and Larry managed them. And you talking about a group that came together. I mean, it was such a varied background of guys. And we were in a dorm in London, or in Bushy, London, right? And these guys were joined at the hip. And from various backgrounds, all came together. All they cared about was winning. Our practices were phenomenal. I mean, they were so competitive and aggressive and physical, and then it just transferred to the games, and we just ran people over. I mean, you went out and played. Our defense was dominant. Our offense was dominant. It was really phenomenal.
Coach, how much would it – I mean, the NFL's doing pretty well on its own. But how much would it help to have a developmental league like having something that like what was in London? I mean, obviously the story everybody knows is Kurt Warner went over there to Amsterdam and tore it up after being in the Arena League. But how important would it be to have a developmental league that had a connection with the NFL to allow players like they did back in the 90s like you guys had?
I think it'd be helpful. I mean, when you look at from my position, right, guys coming out of college, they're in spread offenses. They're working out of two-point stances. They don't understand the pro game. If you could put them in the situation, these guys that are your practice squad guys, these backing into your roster guys, and put them in that situation when they get game time. You know, we played 10 games. That's huge when these guys come back. I know the last time the World League was around, if I'm not mistaken, I was with San Francisco, and we had a kid named Harvey Dahl, right? Harvey was signed as a free agent by Dallas. They cut him. We signed him in the summer of his rookie year. He made our practice squad. The next year we sent him to London. He came back. He made our team. Our team. The next year we had a numbers crunch, so we put him on the practice squad. Atlanta assigned him off our practice squad, and he played for, 9 or 10 years. Yeah. And Harvey was a very good player. So it was really helpful to him. Had another guy named Tony Raggy that did the same thing. He was kind of a back end of the roster guy. He went over and played, came back, made our team, played 5 or 6 years after that. So if you can get these young guys playing time that they can hone their craft, I think it would be advantageous for the NFL because I think quarterbacks and offensive line are the hardest places to develop. They need time. They need time on the field. They need true game time. And if you can get them that, I think it's only going to advance the game.
Coach, thank you so much for the visit. Best of luck.
Thank you.